All right, today we're jumping into a debate that's been on my mind for a while. Whether Ryder from GTA San Andreas was ever supposed to be a traitor. Personally, I don't think he was meant to turn on Grove Street at all, but I've got a friend here who's got some different thoughts. Before we get started, I'll let him share his take, then we'll dive into it.
Hey everyone! First off, thanks for having me here. I'm really excited to dig into one of the most debated topics in GTA San Andreas. Was Ryder always a traitor? Now, I know this game is close to a lot of our hearts, and Ryder's character has caused a lot of heated discussions over the years. Some of you might feel like his betrayal came out of nowhere, but I'm here to argue that Ryder's shady behavior was there all along, just hidden under all that chaos and reckless attitude. I'm not saying Ryder was some criminal mastermind or anything. He's more like that friend who's always causing trouble. And you wonder, wait, whose side are you really on? I hope we can have a good back and forth, and maybe even change some minds.
All right, so here's the thing. Ryder wasn't supposed to be a traitor, not at first. His arc just doesn't have the consistency to back that up. The way Rockstar handles him throughout San Andreas shows this wasn't something planned from the start. I mean, let's look at his early missions. Robbing Uncle Sam and Catalyst. The guy's all about securing weapons for Grove Street, taking out the Ballas and the Vargos. That's not the behavior of someone secretly working against the gang.
Just because he's helping Grove Street at first doesn't mean there aren't cracks in his loyalty. Think about Ryder's personality. He's chaotic, reckless, and honestly, self-serving. Sure, he's securing weapons and going after rivals, but is he doing it because he's loyal or because he's trying to prove something? Ryder's chaotic nature was established early on. Remember when he tried robbing that pizza place just because they covered up Grove Street's graffiti? That wasn't about loyalty to Grove Street. It was Ryder's impulsive need to prove himself, even in situations where it made no sense. He's always acting out of pride or personal gain, not loyalty. And don't forget, there's that moment in the drive-thru mission where he mentions the green Sabre. Big Smoke shuts him up real quick. Doesn't that strike you as suspicious? Like Ryder knew more than he should?
Let's not jump ahead too fast. That green Sabre moment is interesting, but before we even get there, I want to go back to how Ryder's acting early on. Yes, he's reckless, but that's just his character. Ryder has always been hot-headed and aggressive. That doesn't mean he's betraying Grove Street from the start. Plus, he seems genuinely loyal in those early missions, like when he's robbing a train to get weapons for the gang. Everything he does helps Grove Street directly. There's no sign he's secretly working against them, like Big Smoke, who's constantly sneaking around and working for his own interests.
But isn't that exactly what makes Ryder ripe for manipulation? He's volatile, and people like Tempenny and Big Smoke can take advantage of that. And come on, look at the home invasion mission. Ryder will ditch CJ and leave him behind if things go wrong. Doesn't that show he's already thinking more about himself than the gang? This isn't just a one-off moment either. In the same mission, he's obsessed with getting more water, which implies he's constantly distracted by his drug habits. That shows how his self-serving tendencies are always just under the surface.
Leaving CJ behind doesn't necessarily mean betrayal. It just shows Ryder's cowardly side, which he's had all along. He talks tough, but when things get messy, he bails. That's not the same as betraying the gang. If anything, it just highlights his self-serving nature, but he's still doing it for Grove Street. Also, think about how CJ doesn't even mention Ryder's name in the Green Sabre mission. When CJ sees Ryder with Big Smoke, he only calls out Smoke. Later, when CJ talks to Sweet, he still only mentions Smoke's betrayal. If Ryder's betrayal was supposed to be a big deal, why wouldn't CJ even acknowledge it?
CJ not mentioning Ryder's name is strange, but maybe it's because Ryder wasn't the emotional heart of that betrayal. Big Smoke was the mastermind, so CJ's reaction is focused on him. Ryder's betrayal doesn't hit CJ as hard, and maybe that's why Rockstar downplayed it. Ryder was never meant to be the main betrayer, just a secondary one, a pawn manipulated by Smoke and Tenpenny.
But that just proves my point. Ryder wasn't intended to be a traitor from the start. Rockstar added his betrayal late, and it feels rushed because of that. Look at how they reused his voice lines in later missions. It's clear they didn't plan out his betrayal properly. If Ryder's betrayal was always supposed to be part of the story, Rockstar would have developed his arc more. Instead, it feels like an afterthought.
I think you're putting too much weight on the production issues. Sure, Rockstar reused some voice lines, but that doesn't mean they didn't intend for Ryder to flip. Think about it. Ryder's chaotic nature makes him the perfect tool for Tenpenny and Big Smoke. He's reckless, easily manipulated, and he's always shown signs of selfishness, like when he's ready to bail on CJ. He's not the mastermind, but he's definitely part of the betrayal.
But you're overlooking all the inconsistencies in Ryder's character. He was loyal to Grove Street in every early mission. He steals weapons for them, fights alongside CJ, and even attacks the Ballas relentlessly. That's not the behavior of someone plotting against the gang. And don't forget that Tenpenny treats Ryder like a joke. He calls him boy and prick in one scene. If Ryder was really working with Tenpenny, wouldn't Tenpenny show him more respect, like he does with Big Smoke?
Yeah, but Tenpenny manipulating Ryder while also mocking him fits. Ryder's not an equal to Smoke in Tenpenny's eyes, he's a pawn. That's why Tenpenny can look down on him while still using him. And Ryder's behavior, yeah, it's chaotic, but that's exactly what makes him unpredictable. He's a loose cannon, and people like Tenpenny can easily take advantage of that. Also, the unused voice lines from Cleaning the Hood suggest Ryder was willing to sell out CJ to the police. That hints that Ryder wasn't as loyal as he seemed, even early on.
Those unused lines were cut from the game for a reason, though. What we actually see in the game is Ryder fighting for Grove Street, not betraying his crew. His actions in Drive-By and Catalyst are all about helping the gang. Ryder's betrayal feels forced, like Rockstar needed another twist and just decided to make him flip at the last minute.
One thing I noticed we haven't touched on yet is the introduction. That scene where Ryder and Big Smoke are talking before everything kicks off. That's a big deal. Ryder's right there, talking about how he needs to take control of his own future, and a Big Smoke is guiding him into the plan. The introduction makes it clear that Ryder was involved from the beginning, even if Big Smoke was pulling the strings. You can't just ignore that scene. It's clear that Ryder was always meant to betray the gang.
I get what you're saying, but here's the thing. The introduction feels like it was tacked on later to justify Ryder's turn. Sure, he talks about taking control of his destiny, but that's just Rockstar filling in gaps they left in the main game. His betrayal still feels rushed, especially compared to Big Smoke's. They needed to make Ryder's flip make sense, so they used the introduction to plug some of those holes. But let's not act like that scene erases the fact that his loyalty to Grove Street in the early missions is clear. Rockstar just didn't develop his betrayal as well, and the introduction feels like a band-aid for that.
Maybe they added some things late, but the signs of Ryder's betrayal are still there. Even if Rockstar didn't develop it fully, Ryder's erratic behavior fits the role of a secondary traitor. He's not the mastermind, but his betrayal was always bubbling under the surface. Take the mission reuniting the families. Ryder is quick to criticize non-Grove Street members, but what makes this ironic is that he himself is already aligning with the Ballas behind everyone's back. His hypocrisy shows that he's just looking out for himself.
I just remembered something you brought up earlier. Ryder's mention of the green Sabre in the drive-through mission. Now, sure, Big Smoke shuts him down quickly, but honestly, Ryder's always running his mouth. Are we really supposed to believe that one comment was some kind of intentional hint about his involvement? Ryder is impulsive, and that moment feels like him just talking without thinking. If anything, it shows that he wasn't in the loop, just blurting out whatever came to mind, while Big Smoke had to step in to keep things under control.
But that's exactly why it matters. Ryder's impulsiveness makes it more likely he'd slip up and say something he shouldn't have. The green saber is directly tied to CJ's mom's death, and the fact that Ryder even mentions it suggests he knew something about it. Big Smoke shutting him down so fast shows that Ryder wasn't just talking nonsense, he was letting a critical piece of the plot slip. This moment is a crack in the facade, showing that Ryder was directly involved.
I'm still not convinced that Ryder's comment about the green saber proves much, but even if we go with your interpretation, it doesn't end there. Rockstar really went overboard with his character, especially when later in the game, Caesar tells CJ that Ryder tried to assault Kendall. That's not just betrayal, that's full-on character assassination. They turned him from being reckless into a cartoonish villain. If Ryder was supposed to be a traitor all along, why add something so extreme? It feels like Rockstar was trying too hard to make him more despicable just to justify his flip.
Yeah, that moment is a bit much, but Ryder was always chaotic. Rockstar might have exaggerated it a bit for shock value, but that doesn't erase the signs that he was heading down this path. He's selfish, unpredictable, and easily manipulated by guys like Tempenny and Big Smoke. The fact that Rockstar made his actions extreme doesn't necessarily mean they didn't intend for him to turn all along. It just adds to the chaotic nature of his downfall.
I get that Ryder's chaotic, but this feels too far. It's like Rockstar didn't know what to do with his character and decided to throw in every villainous trait they could think of. It feels rushed and disconnected from who he was earlier in the game. If Ryder was always meant to betray Grove Street, they wouldn't have had to resort to character assassination to make him seem like a bad guy.
Okay, yeah, I get that. Ryder's betrayal wasn't handled with the same depth as Big Smoke's, but that doesn't mean it wasn't part of the plan. Ryder was never supposed to be the major villain. He's chaotic, reckless, and easy to manipulate. That's why his betrayal works. It's not about him being the mastermind. It's about him getting caught up in a bigger scheme without fully realizing it. He's a pawn. Remember, in Pier 69, when CJ finally confronts Ryder, he doesn't even have a real weapon. It's like even in his final moments, Ryder's not fully aware of how deep he's in. And even in his final lines, when he boasts about being a genius, it just reinforces that he's always been more about boosting his own ego than really thinking things through.
Sure, but being a pawn doesn't mean the betrayal was planned. Ryder's whole arc feels disconnected, like Rockstar didn't know what to do with him. Even his death in Pier 69 feels rushed. They recycled his voice lines, and the confrontation with him doesn't have any real emotional payoff. Compare that to how CJ feels about Big Smoke's betrayal. Ryder doesn't even get a reaction.
But that's the point. Ryder's betrayal wasn't meant to be the emotional centerpiece. Big Smoke was the one pulling all the strings. Ryder's just collateral damage in the grand scheme. Rockstar might not have given it the same attention, but the signs were there. He's selfish, reckless, and unpredictable. The perfect person to get used by people like Tempenny and Smoke.
Maybe. But if that's the case, then it's a missed opportunity. Ryder's character had potential, but Rockstar dropped the ball. They didn't develop his betrayal properly, and it feels like an afterthought. If he was always meant to betray Grove Street, his arc should have been given more focus and emotional depth.
I can agree with that. Ryder's arc could have been more fleshed out, but I still think his betrayal fits with his chaotic nature. He wasn't the main villain, but he was always susceptible to being manipulated. That's why his betrayal works for me, even if it wasn't handled perfectly.
All right, it's time to lay all the arguments on the table and break this down. From everything we've gone over, it's clear that Ryder wasn't meant to be a traitor. His actions throughout the early part of the game, especially in missions like robbing Uncle Sam and Catalyst, are dedicated to helping Grove Street. He's stealing weapons, taking out rivals like the Ballas, and doing everything in his power to support the gang's goals. These aren't the actions of someone secretly plotting against his own crew. Ryder's chaotic and reckless nature has been brought up, but let's be clear, being unpredictable doesn't mean being disloyal. Ryder's behavior has always been brash and impulsive, but nothing he does early on shows any signs of betrayal. He talks tough, he acts wild, but ultimately he's committed to strengthening Grove Street. If he was truly planning a betrayal, why does he continuously act in ways that directly benefit the gang? Now, sure, you mentioned the green Sabre comment in drive-thru, but even that felt like Ryder being his usual reckless self. There's no solid proof that one moment shows he was directly involved in the plot. And when it comes to the introduction, I still believe that was Rockstar's way of retroactively justifying his betrayal. His loyalty in the early missions speaks for itself. Let's also address how his betrayal feels like a late decision by Rockstar. They recycled his voice lines in later missions, and his death in Pier 69 lacks any emotional weight. Ryder's supposed betrayal doesn't come with any of the gravity you'd expect if it had been planned from the start. CJ, the main character, doesn't even acknowledge Ryder as a traitor. His focus remains on Big Smoke, the true mastermind. This tells us that Ryder was never meant to play a major role in the betrayal. Rockstar clearly didn't put the same effort into his arc, and that's because his betrayal wasn't part of the original story. I've already shown how the claim that Ryder's chaotic personality pointed to disloyalty doesn't hold up. His unpredictability doesn't mean he wasn't loyal. The fact remains that Ryder's actions were loyal until Rockstar needed an additional twist. His betrayal feels rushed, underdeveloped, and inconsistent with how he was portrayed at the beginning of the game. That's because Ryder was never supposed to be a traitor. He was loyal to Grove Street until Rockstar made a last-minute change.
Now that you've laid out your points, here's why I still believe Ryder was always meant to be a traitor. You've highlighted Ryder's early missions, like robbing Uncle Sam and Catalyst, to argue that he was loyal to Grove Street. But these actions don't prove loyalty. They show Ryder acting out of his unpredictable and reckless nature. He was never driven by genuine commitment to the gang. It was all about proving himself and feeding his own ego. His chaotic behavior doesn't make him loyal, it made him vulnerable to manipulation. You also suggested that Rockstar rushed his betrayal, but even if it wasn't as developed as Big Smoke's, it doesn't mean it wasn't part of the plan. Ryder was never meant to be the main villain. He was a secondary player, which is why his betrayal wasn't as dramatic. Still, the signs were there, like in the drive-thru mission when he mentions the green Sabre and Smoke quickly shuts him down. That's a key moment showing that Ryder knew more than he let on. Then in Home Invasion, Ryder bails on CJ, showing his self-serving tendencies. These are not the actions of someone truly loyal to Grove Street. You've argued that CJ's focus on Big Smoke proves Ryder wasn't important to the betrayal, but that doesn't hold up. Big Smoke was the mastermind, so it makes sense that CJ focused on him. Ryder was always going to be a secondary figure in this plot, which is why his betrayal feels more subtle. But just because it wasn't front and center doesn't mean it wasn't always there. His unpredictable, selfish nature fits perfectly with a character who could be swayed to betray the gang. And don't forget the introduction. It showed that Ryder was part of the plan from early on, even if Smoke was leading the way. In the end, Ryder's actions throughout the game reveal someone who was always primed for betrayal. His unpredictable and selfish nature made him easy to manipulate, even if Rockstar didn't flesh it out as much as Big Smoke's arc. Ryder wasn't the loyal ally you think. He was always teetering on the edge, ready to flip when it suited him.
Well, that wraps up the debate. We've both made our cases, and it's been a really interesting discussion breaking down Ryder's character and his role in the game. I think we've covered all the key points here.
Yeah, it's been a great conversation, really diving deep into how Rockstar handled Ryder's arc. It's always fun to go back and look at these details and challenge each other's viewpoints.
This debate definitely reminded me of why San Andreas has stood the test of time. It's a complex game with a lot of layers, and Ryder's role is just one piece of that puzzle. Thanks for watching, everyone. Hopefully this debate got you thinking more about Ryder's character. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Where do you stand on Ryder's role?
And don't forget to let us know who you think made the stronger case. Ryder might not be the biggest focus of the game, but his story is worth discussing.
Totally agree. And hey, maybe next time we can tackle something a little easier, like figuring out Big Smoke's order at the drive-thru.